What is up, guys? Coming at you from the top 1K once again. Today, I just wanted to touch on the current meta and a few of the decks which are rising to prevalence in the ranked ladder, and why picking up a deck which may have won a tournament might actually be doing you more harm than good. Now, guys, I do make Pokemon Pocket content every day, if not every other day. So if you do enjoy this video, please do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for the next one, and enjoy the video. First of all, I want to take a look at the Ursa Weekly from I think about 4 days ago, and let's talk about the winning deck, which is of course a deck we looked at yesterday, which is the Snorlax Giratina. We have a look at the list. So we looked at the list yesterday. It is basically like a Greninja line with Snorlax Giratina, a couple of Oaks, a couple of Pokemon Center Ladies, a couple of Barrys, Cyrus. You know, you guys know the drill at this point. This deck won the Ursa tournament. It rose to popularity. And basically what's happened is since then, we are seeing a massive influx of this deck in not only tournaments, but in the ranked ladder. Anecdotally, I have versed this deck 4 or 5 times in the last like 10 games. And what I want to say is just because it won the tournament doesn't necessarily mean you will have a lot of success with it. It is not the end all and be all of decks. And the results in Ursa, I think it had a 54% win rate overall or a 56% win rate, that deck in that tournament. But it doesn't necessarily apply to other tournaments. So we'll just pick out the Darkrai. Okay, let's go into this one. So I'm sure this deck would have been played. We'll go metagame. And if we have a look at the decks, so the most played decks were Solgaleo and Skarmory, and it had a win rate of 60%. Then we go down to Giratina EX Snorlax, and the win rate's only 37.5%. So that's 16, 17, 18% lower than the Ursa tournament. And why is that? Well, you got to remember that when a deck rises to prevalence, people find ways to counter that deck. So anecdotally, for example, I put out a video yesterday talking about Darkrai Giratina. I talked about the list and how I run a red card and a Mars, and I'm really doing that to counter what I see a lot of, which is like your Rampardos, your Meowscaradas, those decks. But in the last day, 2 days, since Giratina EX and Snorlax and Greninja is increasing popularity, I actually pinned a comment tweaking it and actually changed a couple of cards and added 2 more heals into the deck. And straight away, those 2 more heals have helped me have the edge against that deck because Greninja's chip is no longer as detrimental. And that has won me, I'd say I've only lost 1 game against this deck from 5 games, right? So I have a 80% win rate against that deck currently running Darkrai Giratina. If we go to another tournament, obviously this is limited data, so let's go to Frog EX. This is a larger tournament, 217 players. Let's have a look at this guy. So we'll go to the metagame. The most played deck, 16% was Giratina EX and Snorlax. The win rate was still only 40%. We look at the other decks, which are kind of consistent, like Charizard EX, Incineroar, Giratina EX, Darkrai, Garchomp, Rampardos. They're kind of all staying at the 50%. Solgaleo EX, Skarmory also, I think people have observed this in a few tournaments, isn't actually the be-all and end-all that people were kind of thinking it was. Garchomp EX and Rampardos, actually, which I just kind of glossed over. Overall, I'm just trying to get through to you that just because this Snorlax EX won a tournament doesn't mean it is actually be-all and end-all of decks. It is not the new king of the meta. So when you're looking for a deck that you want to play that is really consistent, let's go to Ursa again quickly. You want to find a deck which remains consistent throughout. So then looking at the overall snapshot of the meta, currently the most played deck is Solgaleo EX and Skarmory at close to 10%. The win rate is just over 50%, but I believe this win rate is trending downwards. Then we have the Darkrai Giratina, which 56% is absolutely insane. That is a crazy win rate. 7.5% share. It's too consistent. 2 basic EX mons is just way too good. Charizard EX and Incineroar 53%, 53.5%. Decent representation. Really good as well. I think very consistent. Those middle 2 decks there, Giratina, Darkrai, and Charizard, Incineroar EX, very consistent. Solgaleo, I mean, it's a good deck. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I think you have to know that people are building to counter that deck. So it is a deck where, you know, it might service you quite well against in the lower tiers, but as you get higher, you might find that there are far more decks built to counter Solgaleo. Then we go to Giratina EX Snorlax, which, like I said, 53.4 at the moment, a pretty big share in a short period of time, 5.5%. I do believe that win rate is trending downwards because I think that generally people are finding ways to counter this deck, which is introducing more heals, which is finding other ways to damage and deal damage to Snorlax quickly. There are a lot of things you can do, like double Sabrina, Cyrus. Like there are things that you can do to counter this deck, like I was saying with my Darkrai deck. Solo Charizard EX 45.5. I mean, the Stoke Charizard solo is going to always kind of be a middle of the run deck, just because if you're not running Turtle with it or Incineroar, you're really handicapping yourself because Oricorio is being inserted into every deck. You will see Giratina EX, Snorlax, Greninja, and Oricorio now. You will see Darkrai, Giratina, Oricorio. Everyone's kind of slipping Oricorio into decks, so Solo Charizard is just not that good at the moment. Lucario Rampardos will always be pretty rock solid, pardon the pun. It's just such a good combination, and I think it's definitely still better than Lycanroc the more that I play against it and the more that I see it. Decidueye Meowscarada, not a deck that I would recommend. Like, it's okay, but I think if you want to climb, I'd be sticking to some of the staples, which I'll touch on again. Arceus EX Crobat, I think, is a fantastic one. Solo Incineroar, I mean, it's not too bad either, because realistically, in that Incineroar Charizard deck, you're probably relying on Incineroar to take out Oricorio with its burn, plus probably using Torracat. Lycanroc Rampardos, kind of dropping off in popularity and in win rate. Pretty easy to play around. Magnezone Oricorio is an interesting one because I do think it's still like a pretty solid deck. It's not that potent because people have ways to defeat Oricorio. Then really it's just down to Magnezone, which 110 damage isn't really that much. So it's just not that great, but it's still got a really good win rate because it probably is running into a lot of these EX decks, and less so, you know, if in these tournaments it was matched up against Lycanroc Rampardos or Lucario Rampardos more often than not, the win rate will be lower. But luckily the market share is mostly EX decks. So if you are a lower ranked player looking to climb up towards Master Ball, the decks I would recommend on this list, I mean, Solgaleo EX Skarmory is fine, but I think you will find that it gets a little bit harder to win with as you get higher, unless you draw amazing hands every turn. But the speed and reliability of Rare Candy is quite good, but again, probably not as consistent as some of these other decks. The number one deck, which people will hate me for again, I think if you want to climb ladder and ranked, is just Darkrai Giratina. It is just too good into pretty much literally every deck in the meta. Probably the only deck which gives it a hard time is going to be Beedrill Meowscarada if they get the energy burn. Even Decidueye Meowscarada I think is quite easy to beat if you're running Red Card and Mars. Just disrupt those draws with Cry for Help. Unless they get the perfect draws, I still think that matchup still favors Giratina Darkrai. Charizard EX Incineroar I would recommend as well. I think that's a pretty solid deck. Really fun to play as well. It's fast, it's powerful, does a lot of damage, and you can deal with Oricorio in a relatively satisfying way. Giratina EX Snorlax I am not going to recommend. I think it's got a high skill ceiling. I think that the players in the tournaments, obviously seasoned players, quite good at the game. Even in tournament situations, you can see the win rate on this thing is falling off. I wouldn't recommend the deck. I think that everyone that I seem to be versing isn't really playing it optimally from what I can see when I verse people, even in the Master Ball tier. I wouldn't touch this deck. Solo Stoke Charizard, I know its win rate's not great in 20s, but I think it's still an okay deck to run in ranked. I just wouldn't expect to win every game. You might lose 5 in a row. You might win 10 in a row. It's one of those decks where it's kind of all or nothing. And if you run into the Oricorio or you just don't get your Rare Candy, you're probably going to lose. But if you do get it really quickly, then you're probably going to win. Lucario Rampardos, I recommend. So Giratina, EX Darkrai, Charizard, Incineroar, and Lucario Rampardos. I think those three are really, really good here. And the fourth deck I'll recommend is Arceus EX Crobat. And that can be Arceus EX Crobat Darkrai or Arceus EX Crobat Carnivine. But either way, either of those decks I think is really good. So if you want to see the Darkrai list visually, I'll open it now, but my list is a little bit different to this most likely. But I'll talk you through that. So this is more or less a pretty standard list. The only way my deck actually does vary from this is I basically drop Pokemon Center Lady and I run Guzma. So I run the 2 heals only, the 2 potions. Even with the Giratina, that's generally enough. And the reason Pokemon Center Lady is not that useful is because sometimes you really need to like Cyrus and heal on the same turn or Sabrina and heal on the same turn. And being able to save the supporter slot, one of those, and heal with potion, I think is much more valuable. So this is pretty much the deck list I recommend, but I would swap Pokemon Center Lady for Guzma. Because Guzma is also basically red as well. If they've got a giant cape and they think they're going to survive, Guzma strips it away. That's 20 extra damage, right? Because they have 20 less HP. So that is the list I recommend for that. This list is pretty stock standard. I don't think there's any changes to make here. No notes really. So it's the 2 Charmanders, 1 Charmeleon, and the Charizard. Then you run the 1 Litten and 1 Incineroar. Just because really the main focus of this deck is Charizard. Incineroar is just a bonus. Litten's also decent because it does do the 30 damage. So it does 30 damage, so it can do some work to Oricorio. Downside is it does die in one turn due to the recoil, so you can obviously run the other version of Litten too. Then the 2 Oaks, 2 Lilies. Lily is really good in this deck for healing. Iono, red, 2 Pokeballs, 2 rare candies, obviously a Pokecoms, red card, and Giant Cape. I mean, you could probably run a Torracat in this deck as well if you wanted to, just to give you some further damage potential against Oricorio, just because it does 40 damage just like Charmeleon. Otherwise, you are relying on the burn from Firefang and Charmeleon/Charmander. But that is actually one of the reasons these decks do run the Ember Charmander, because Ember Charmander can do 30 against Oricorio rather than just the 20. So the Lucario Rampardos deck, again, pretty stock standard. It just basically runs the Riolu, Lucario, Cranidos, Rampardos, and then you are running Marshadow. Marshadow is just a really good like check card. So they might put you in a situation where you have to sack a Mon. If you put that energy into Marshadow on that turn, preempting that, they either have to let your Mon live, Sabrina Marshadow win if you don't have Sabrina protection, or find another way around, because Marshadow will do 100 damage to them, 120 if Lucario is up. So Marshadow is a really good like check or checkmate Pokemon. So similar or standard rare candy structure really. So you run 2 of the final Evo, you run 1 of the middle stage, and we have 2 of the starter, which is a Skull Fossil in this instance. 2 candies and Pokecoms, obviously need those. Then it's the 2 Oaks, the Sabrina, the Lily, the Iono, and 2 Pokeballs. So one thing that I typically do is I often do drop Lily from this deck in favor of Cyrus, because really healing into Rampardos most of the time is irrelevant, because most of the time if you're killing them, you're dropping to 100 or 120. And let's be honest, by the time you get Rampardos out, they're probably in a position to kill Rampardos the following turn. So it's very rare that it actually pay off for Lily. So I actually recommend not running Lily personally, but if you want to follow this exact list, you can. So the Arceus EX Crobat Carnivine deck, again, not really any notes on this one, pretty stock standard list. It is really just about building your Crobat as fast as possible on the bench. Ideally, be in a position to have a Zubat, Arceus, and Carnivine in play. You get really good damage quickly with Carnivine if you're versing like a Dark Tina on field. Perfect if Darkrai's on field, you kill it in 2 turns. If not, you know, you can still do work with Crobat. This deck does run Grass Energy only, so Crobat can never attack, but Zubat does do 30 damage a turn to Psychic types, so it can do some work to Giratina too. Otherwise, stock standard list, we got the 2 Oaks, 1 Cyrus, 1 Leaf, 1 Mars, 1 Iono, 2 Pokeballs, 2 Candies, 1 Comms, and 1 Cape. Otherwise, this is a pretty good starting list to work with. And if after all this, you still do want to try this deck, the list is on screen. There are 2 Froakie, 2 Greninja, 2 Lax. I think 2 Giratina EX is better than 1, to be honest. So I would be running 2 Giratina EX, the 2 Oaks, 2 Barry, 1 Cyrus. I would probably run the 1 Pokemon Lady. This is obviously running the dual energy Water Psychic. So Irida does have some value here, but I'd probably drop the Irida from this deck, and I would probably swap the Poison Barb for a Rocky Helmet. I'm just not a believer in the Poison Barb. I think Rocky Helmet is much better. Also, running 1 tool is kind of bad because Guzma is so popular, so once it's gone, it's basically a wasted card. So whether you even want a tool, you know, Rocky Helmet I think is still the better one. Attach it to Snorlax and just sit there. 2 candies, 2 balls, 1 red card. Again, like, I'd probably just run a Mars at this point. But I do understand the red card in this deck is obviously quite decent because you are potentially wanting to use Barry early on. So you could use Barry, your red card in the same turn, completely obliterate your opponent's hand, plus get the Barry damage off. So this is a relatively standard list. I showed a different list on stream on my video yesterday. You can check that out instead. But I don't recommend playing this deck because I think the skill cap is a bit higher. But if you do want to try it, go ahead. But that is it. I'll leave the video here. I really just wanted to talk about a few of the current decks in the meta and just, you know, raise a few concerns I have with people kind of just going for the flavor of the month decks. I think I can do more harm than good, and I'm kind of seeing that on Reddit as well. People will be like, I tried the Snorlax Giratina deck and it was terrible. Well, it's just because people will adapt and counter that deck. They'll find a way to counter that deck, whether it's adding more heals, whether it's running more Sabrinas. That's just the game, and adapting is important. I am constantly changing the decks that I play I'm constantly changing 1 or 2 cards to tweak them to suit what I'm running into. Because remember, it's a bit strange, but sometimes this game will feed you the same opponent, not the same person, but like the same deck like a few times in a row. And you might lose the same way a couple of times. And at that point, you should probably realize, oh, but if I actually had this instead of this, I probably would have won both those games. So definitely keep in mind, if you're seeing certain situations happen a lot, maybe consider tweaking 1 or 2 cards. It might be adding Team Rock or Grunt, might be a second Mars. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one.